All right. All right, it's looking like we're live. So welcome to another live MENding check-in. I'm Lucas Schaefer. I'm the MENding coordinator at Kawartha Sexual Assault Center. And right now we're streaming live on Instagram and Facebook. And also later, you'll be able to catch us on Trent Radio with our new show, Man Cave Confidentials. Pardon me. And you'll be able to check that out on 92.7 CFFF FM. And today we have Dan here. So Dan, if you'd be able to introduce yourself.
Hi, happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me, Lucas. Yes, as you were saying, I am a MENding facilitator. It's something that I've done before. Maybe we can talk a bit about what MENding is and what it means to be a facilitator. Essentially, and maybe as the coordinator, you can clarify this a little better if I don't do it justice. But it's a program that's about ending gender-based violence and engaging men in doing this. And I've been involved since I started training in the program a couple years ago. I was in the first cohort. And it was about 4 sessions in which we learned about things like consent, bystander intervention, and just essentially trying to improve ourselves and help teach boys and other men the tools in order to fight gender-based violence. To end it. So yeah, I have been involved more pre-COVID to that effect, volunteering at different events and helping get the word out there about the resources that the KSAC or the Kawartha Sexual Assault Center offers. Yeah, it's been a great time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dan. So tell us, how did you get into MENding?
Well, it's a funny story because it was a link on Facebook. I think there was like a flyer or e-flyer, whatever, that my partner saw, and she forwarded it to me and said, "Hey, I think this would be a really good program for you. I think you'd enjoy it a lot. So you should reach out and email them." So I did, and I have to say it was one of the best things I've ever done because, you know, I really learned a lot through doing it, and I just have to say it was a really great time and a very valuable thing.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. So what was kind of like a takeaway from MENding that you felt really like stood out?
That's a great question. In terms of a takeaway, I mean, there were so many different things. It's hard to really put it all in a nutshell. I would say just that if you want to end gender-based violence, you know, and engaging other people in casual conversation can be a very good starting point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've chatted with people over time who kind of thought, oh, that kind of thing doesn't really happen around here, or it only takes the form of, you know, creepy stalker in the bushes kind of thing at night, you know, how our society tends to view this. But there's so much that happens behind closed doors, or, you know, I've you know, not to share stories or anything, but I remember years ago, back when I was maybe a first or second year student, seeing a dispute that was more verbally violent between, I think, a man and his girlfriend. and I could tell things were getting heated, and I didn't
Mhm.
feel like I had a lot of tools to try to be a good bystander then. And I tried to sort of engage them in conversation, and they both seemed to get mad at me, which I mean, maybe it did something to help. I don't know, but ever since then, I was kind of thinking, I wish I had better tools in my arsenal to deal with this kind of thing, and just being able to distract people too. That's one of the things we learned. Oh, maybe you ask what are the directions to this or that place. It gets them thinking about something else, or just various other things that could just try to distract from the situation. That's just, it can try to take the heat out of the moment.
Yeah.
But in the long term, just sort of there's a lot that needs to be unpacked about this that we don't really address in our society. So yeah, I hope I wasn't going on too long there.
No, no, that was perfect, Dan. Thank you so much.
Cool.
Actually, we have a comment in from a previous MENding facilitator who was also interviewed on MENding, like live MENding check-ins. We have William saying that is such a relatable story, Dan. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure that, we aren't the only ones who have experienced this kind of thing, who have seen it. I'm sure everyone's got their stories that are something similar to this. And again, that's just something that happened outside of closed doors, on a campus, and what happens behind closed doors, you know,
Yeah.
that
And
we can't really be bystanders about.
yeah. And like I think you hit on like such like a really common misconception, right? That like sexual violence happens from oftentimes like strangers, but we know that when gender-based and sexual violence happens, that it's often that the survivor knew the perpetrator beforehand, right? So um, thank you very much for sharing that. If I can like kind of dive into this more,
Yeah.
of course, like without sharing anything that you don't want to, what are some bystander intervention strategies that you learned in the MENding facilitation program that you think might have been able to help?
That is a very good question. Thinking back to that time, instead of addressing it, because I remember at the time saying something along the lines of, "Hi, miss, are you okay? Is everything okay?" Which kind of put the focus on the argument, him looking a little bit forceful. Again, it was dark, but maybe it felt like I was probably stepping in there too much,
Mm-hmm.
instead of saying, "Oh, hi, do you mind like distracting them? Do you mind letting me know where the nearest convenience store is, or do you know what time it is?" And just trying to pull the attention away from that. Um, I don't know, or my cell phone ran out of batteries. Do you mind if I make a call on yours, or something like that?
Yeah.
Just various ways, because at that time, and the thing you need to keep in mind too, that we're taught in the MENding program, is you don't want to put yourself in danger either. If it's a very violent situation, that can be altogether different. But at the time, I didn't really feel like I was at risk, and those kind of situations, I think it was a little different. But again, if you feel like you'd be at risk, that might be the time to try to do another strategy. And it gets a little more complicated then.
Yeah.
uh,
But
yeah.
like I think that that's a great intervention strategy, right? Doing that distracts, right? If you were worried about coming off as too confrontational or not wanting to like put yourself in harm's way, going in with a calm and curious attitude, right? Saying like, hey, do you know where the closest grocery store is? Or hey, like my phone's dead. Do you know if I can like can I get some help?
Hmm.
And taking away from that conversation and really like bringing things back down to like a acceptable level. Yeah, great stuff, Dan. Heck yeah.
Thank you.
And yeah, and thank you for talking about that previous experience. I know sometimes when we talk about bystander intervention and we like reflect on like previous ones, that like we can always look back and say we could have done something better, right? But something that we have as like a mantra in when we're teaching bystander intervention is that it's always better to do something, right? And there's always something that you can do. It doesn't always have to look like the going in direct kind of way, almost like a superhero, but you can do something. Yeah, awesome. Were there any other kind of standout points that you took from the MENding facilitation training that you'd like to chat about?
Yeah, certainly. I think that we touched on some very interesting points. And one of the things we learned in MENding was, the definition of gender-based violence. And going into it, when I was first, watching the slides, watching the presentation, and just seeing, what we'll go over the definition, what is gender-based violence or GBV, I was like, what does that mean? I've never heard of that. I mean, I had some kind of inkling of what it might have been, but it really, and of course, one of the things we talk about is essentially it's violence committed against someone based on their gender. So I mean, the meaning is kind of in the name, but a lot of the time we see it taking the form, at least that we know of statistically, of violence against women, which is usually, perpetrated by men towards women. But there's also violence committed by men towards other men. But of course, not to forget, what about violence committed by men towards non-binary folk or trans folk? There's various things that I learned from that, and I thought this was very interesting stuff, and I didn't know how prevalent it was. So,
Yeah, like, oh, thank you so much, Dan. Like, that's like a huge point that we emphasize in MENding, right? That there's a difference between a common term that we like often refer to as like violence against women, and then we talk about gender-based violence, right? And I think you highlighted the very like different nuances between those two terms and why those two terms are used, right? Because like when we talk about gender-based violence and when we talk about sexual violence, we can recognize that it has a gendered nature, right? There's like a disproportional amount of female identified folk being targeted and like who are facing that violence, right? And we know that a majority of the perpetrators are male, right? But when we talk about sexual violence and violence, right, it happens to and from all genders, right? We want to make sure that we're able to support and include everyone in these conversations that we're having when we're talking about engaging and ending gender-based violence. Thank you so much, Dan.
Yeah, no worries.
So, Dan, would you be able to talk to me a little bit about where you work, if you're able, if you want
to? Sure. Yeah. So yeah, I work at a company selling research chemicals to different chemistry labs, industry, academic, etc. So we're essentially a distributor, but yeah, going into MENding, it was funny because I was like one of the only people who was in sales, and everyone else was pretty much teaching or social working, and they were very much in the kind of fields in which they were dealing with people a lot. Not that I don't deal with people, but more over the phone and less directly, not in the same capacity, but I still wanted to get those skills for other aspects of my life, passing on the knowledge. So yeah, I felt like one of the few people there who was sort of in a different field.
Fair enough. Yeah. The reason why I wanted to kind of like ask you to talk about your job is because I wanted to ask how MENding may have influenced how you interact with that job. Like, are there opportunities or like bystander intervention like moments that like you felt the MENding kind of training helped you or aided you in, or something along those lines?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's hard to pinpoint anything, but I feel like just knowing what I know from mending and being able to bring that material to the job in case, if anyone asks me any questions about gender-based violence or the resources that KSAC offers, I feel like I can actually help them. Whereas I didn't really have that knowledge before. I didn't even know what KSAC was before a few years ago. So just knowing what I know now and being able to offer guidance when asked for, then I think that's very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too, right? Like, thank you very much for your honesty as well, because like, obviously, this is like something that we have been recently rediscussing it in MENding with me, myself, and Alicia and Ryan and I. Is that like MENding isn't sort of you take the MENding program and you check a box and you're done, right? It's this ongoing process that you keep learning and growing and finding new points within, right? So, and something that you can take from the MENding thing is like, as you're talking about, right? Like now you can make meaningful referrals to people in your life who need like support, right? And whatever support looks like for them. So that's awesome.
Yeah. And I've really found that since I did the MENding program, I've been having more open and honest conversations with family and friends about sexual violence and just even opening up that topic. I didn't feel comfortable talking about that in the past, or it just never really came up, but now at least if there's someone in my family or a friend who could use the resources, either I can point them to KSAC, or there's all these other sexual assault centers across Ontario, right? So there's different places they can be referred to. So but it's just been very, very useful, very helpful, and it's really opened up my eyes, and I have been able to sort of take that knowledge and I think make good use of it. So yeah.
Nice. Thank you so much, Dan.
No problem.
Yeah, like you were talking about having like honest conversations with your family, right? And like, of course, like talking about sexual violence and gender-based violence is the most like probably one of the most intimate and vulnerable things that we're able to talk about. And something that I really value and talk a lot about with the previous MENding folks and as many people who are willing to listen is that MENding gives like a really great opportunity to have like real kind of like genuine conversations. Are there any points in MENding where like you felt like we were having like a genuine kind of authentic conversation? Yeah, like what is being like authentic in MENding kind of look like? Yeah.
It looks like being able to really open up and feel like you can disclose just about anything without feeling like there could be a negative reaction or some kind of consequence, because sometimes I feel like we face that, like certain topics might be off the table, but excuse me, I do remember, I think it was maybe the first lesson, we were talking about the Me Too movement and some famous cases, and it was something I felt like we could all really touch on because we'd all heard about it in the media. I mean, at the time, I think we were talking mainly about John Ghomeshi and Bill Cosby, and since then there's been so many other cases or instances to discuss, and we just were really able to open up and talk about our feelings about this and how society really treated the victims of these perpetrators, and how lenient it was towards the perpetrators. All these famous men who mostly got slaps on the wrist, or very, very little consequences for all the damage they did.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a term called victim blaming. Would you like to talk to us about that term?
Yeah. So that's one of the other things we talked about, of course, victim blaming, and kind of like it sounds like it's society's way of putting blame on the victim. It could be like saying, well, she shouldn't have worn that. She shouldn't have been out at night. There's a lot of should have statements, and the I guess all the onus is put on the victim for that having happened to her, and I'm just going to use her terms in this case because more often than not,
Mhm.
um, happens to women, but not always, of course. But yeah, so oftentimes society and people echo this this idea that it was the victim who was to blame for putting themselves into a circumstances in which that some kind of sexual violence happened against them, when really we should be not doing that and putting the emphasis on, well, why did this perpetrator do that? Let's start talking about that. Let's look at them, and why aren't we blaming the perpetrator, and what can we do to change this this culture, this well I and that can bring us into another term, rape culture, right?
Absolutely,
um
yeah. Um,
yeah. there's a lot
that
to
was perfect.
unpack.
There really is, right? And there's so much to unpack, and there's almost so little time. We have to keep having these discussions and keep updating our knowledge. But that was said beautifully. Thank you so much, Dan.
Oh, no
Um,
problem, thank you.
we have a comment on our Facebook page from Ryan.
Hi, Ryan.
Learning that distractions could be a useful bystander intervention technique was such a aha moment for me. um, yeah, yeah, like it's just because like I think bystander intervention is always cast as like this kind of superhero model. You go in, you pick up a car and you throw it, kind of like intervention style. But there's a lot of ways we can prevent harm from happening. And
Yeah, and well, it's just like you said. I mean, you termed it in a superhero way, and think of how many times you watch movies like Spider-Man or Batman, where there's a woman in distress. There's, I don't know, someone's going to mug her or something, attack her, and then literally a superhero swings in, saves the day, and the only way to save the day is to use violence. He usually beats up the bad guy, I don't know, brings him to the police station. But again, it's kind of this idea of, it's essentially promoting violence to counter violence. It's like fighting fire with fire. When really, if we can sort of what's the term I'm looking for?
is it de-escalate?
De-escalate. Yes, de-escalate the situation. That's really, I think, a better approach, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
If a fight doesn't have to happen, then it doesn't have to happen, right? If you're able to kind of enter those situations with a calm, collective, and curious uh, attitude, then you can stop a lot of harm from happening, and a lot of harm from happening to yourself as well, right? I know for a fact that not everybody can. Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Like another thing we talk. Excuse me. Another thing we talk about in mending is how like different people are able to engage and intervene in different situations. Would you like to speak to that today? Would you like to speak to that, Dan?
Um, sure, yeah. I mean, I suppose we all have different styles. I mean, again, for me, distracting, I think, is a style that I prefer, and trying to do so in a safe manner. I mean, like I was talking about with the story earlier, if I approached it again, I would try to maybe be more distracting, but it really, I suppose it depends on the situation, right? I have a lot of hesitancy about calling the police, because instead of de-escalating a situation, you might escalate it. Um, I don't know if there's any services more like calling a social worker or someone to, I wish we had that. Maybe we do, I don't know, but That's something society's really talking about more, I think, in the last
Absolutely, yeah.
couple months. But I don't want to get too much into that because we could spend a lot of time on that for sure. But yeah,
Perhaps in another time.
yeah,
Yeah,
another
yeah,
time. Exactly,
yeah.
exactly.
I think that's such a great point, though. Like, yeah, I do think you're right. Like, I do think a lot of like states and municipalities are looking into like alternative ways and alternatives to police for like
Mhm,
community protection. And I think you're right. Like, I think we need a plethora of options for justice, right? Like, if we want
mhm.
uh, if we want to protect communities and have people like be safe, then there's going to be many ways of doing that. And when the ways that we often like refer to are like not doing as well as they should, or have like problems that don't seem to be able to be like reformed in efficient ways, then maybe
Mhm.
we have to start something else, right? There's going to be many ways to do this.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I totally agree with you there. Yeah.
yeah. Thanks, Dan.
Mhm.
All right, Dan. So we've been talking for a bit, and we've been talking about lovely things. But to finish off, I want to ask you if you have a final statement to say to the men out there listening to us right now.
That is a very good question. A final statement. I mean, it's hard to put it overly succinct, I guess I would say. Um, just to be open to being honest and having conversations about things that would normally make you uncomfortable is good, and being able to have those conversations with other men. I don't know how much time we'll have to talk about it, but uh, you know, oftentimes I think we live behind masks, and I'm not talking about the physical kind that we have in the pandemic. That's totally different. That can save lives. I mean an emotional kind, right? And we live behind these emotional masks that we learn to put on very early in life. And I mean, I'm still working on trying to take off mine more, but we're often afraid of opening up and talking about our emotions and doing so in a healthy way. But I think if we're able to do that, it keeps us from bottling up a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. And I think a lot of the violence that happens on the part of these perpetrators is, and maybe this is a broad statement, but maybe it's accurate. Maybe it's the result of bottled up anger and resentment and feeling like society only lets us men convey emotions that are destructive, essentially, that are
Mhm.
anger. We're not allowed to show, sadness. We're not allowed to show that. We're not allowed to show, um, not usually allowed to show joy or depression. There's a lot of emotions we're not allowed to show, a lot of things we're not allowed to talk about. But if we could do that in a healthy way, then I think it'd help a lot in fighting gender-based violence and living healthier lives. So,
That was perfect. Thank you so much, Dan. Wow.
yeah, no problem. I mean, it felt kind of like a very long-winded statement, maybe a bit of a run on words there or something, but it's hard to put it shortly. And I think over time I'm learning a lot about what would I say to other men, what would I recommend. I'm learning about changes to make in my own life, but I hope to sort of have these conversations with other men, and yeah, just to keep that going, right? And that's where I'm very happy that we have mending, and that we're trying to put these tools to good use, right? So
Yeah. It's yeah, it's like it's using our power for good. We're back to superhero things, but that's what it
But
is. At the end
in
of
a
the day.
realistic way.
Absolutely, yeah, because
Exactly.
it's not like power isn't like a real thing, right?
Hmm.
Of course it is. Yeah. Thank you, Dan. Oh,
Exactly.
very well said.
Thanks, Lucas.
Yeah. So I want to thank everyone for joining us. I know that we were having issues on Instagram. My apologies for that. But if you were able to join us on Facebook, I'm very happy that you were able to listen to me and Dan speaking. And we'll catch you at the next MENding live check-in. Until then, take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.